dang it, the thingy. Okay, well, this is fine. I was like, I spent so long. Wait, no, where did you go? Oh, there you are. I spent
I
so
need to.
long
I need.
yesterday messing with the setup and everything, trying to get the line right in between with Mr. Volcano last night to make sure it all looked good. Didn't work.
Looks great. I guess. Let me flip myself here. Look at that.
There you
That's
go.
much nicer.
You did better than I could last time. I was all looking the other direction, trying to figure out what I was doing. Okay, let me shut this. Otherwise, I'll get like giant. There will be giant beef smoke masses coming across the camera. Alrighty. Well, sweet. Thank you so much for coming on, dude. I'm so
Sure.
excited to talk to you. How are
Thank you.
you?
Thank you for having me on. I got my second cup of coffee, and I'm good to go.
Nice. Me too. I got my second cup of coffee.
I see. I've got a SpongeBob glass, so
Ah, I think it's required that every geologist has this mug. I'm not joking. I know Rocket Sage does. I'd be surprised if GeoGym didn't as well. It's got like geologic time and the different. I know for a fact paleontologizing has this.
that's a cool mug.
It is. Balint is significantly lower volume. I think so. Give me 1 second. Balint, could you say something again, please?
Test, test, test,
All
test.
right. I'm gonna put you up. I think that is the problem. How's that, Ariella? Is it better?
Any better, Ariella? Any better?
I think it's better.
I know I can be changed like in the interface with guest star. If you hover over my name, you can
Oh.
adjust my volume as well. So if that's also one way we can do that
Oh, under.
that I do not have access to.
Oh, I didn't know that you could do that. Thank you. You're at 100%. Oh no, 200. There we go.
Uh-oh. How's this chat? Any better? Any better? Oh no, now I'm louder.
It's fine. It's good. It's good. There we go. That's good, right?
Test, 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 maybe.
Yay! It's great. It's fantastic.
Too loud. I'm too loud.
You're too loud. No, no, no. No. Gucci. Gucci. You're Gucci. Smike says Gucci. Thanks, Smikes. Appreciate it. We both need to talk at the same time. All right. Three, two, one.
Test, test, test,
Valent is
test.
louder than me. There we go.
Oh no, no,
Okay.
no.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. It's fine. It's fine. I'll talk quiet.
Don't worry. Soon it'll start echoing. It's all good.
I hope not. I like went and I got headphones and everything this time. So
Oh no, no. This isn't from you. This is just like a guest star thing that occasionally just kicks on an echo.
I thought that was me during the last
No,
stream. So I'm really glad to know that that's not me. That's kind of a
that's
bummer.
not you. That's a guest star feature right now. Feature. And sometimes it just kicks on an echo. It's still
Dang.
in like beta, right? Like they're still testing it
Oh,
out.
I guess it is. I forgot that. I forgot it was still in beta.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's because they had that rebrand too. It's like streaming together and yeah.
Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 Well, that's
But
okay.
good morning, everyone.
We will make do. Good morning. Welcome, chat. How is everybody? Yeah, welcome to Coffee with the Scientist. We are going to go over a paper. We are. I don't know if I've noticed, but is there a possibility of me sending a volcanic rock to Science for his scope stream? I have, I think. I'm pretty sure I sent him a sample of my Chaos Crags lavas one time. I'm
Hmm.
not sure.
We also had that crossover recently where we
Mm-hmm.
looked at the stromatolite that Volcano Doc sent. We talked about why it's like one of the coolest samples that I have,
It
the
was,
billion years old.
I mean, like, it's just. I'm, we're geologists. We have old rocks. We do. Oh, thank you so much for the lurk, Fishman. Hey, Kamashita, welcome. How are you? You're doing bueno? You got some crew brew and enjoying it. Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, it was really, really fun. I don't know if it's still up Brick Lane on the VOD, but I know that Science posted it to his YouTube, so you can totally go and watch it there, which is
Yeah,
always
that
great.
had to be saved. It was
Follow
far
us
too
both on the YouTubes. Support science streaming.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
It was such a fun crossover, Doc. Thank you so much also for having me on here today because I'm like, I've been so looking forward to it. I'm nervous too. I'm like, oh no, Volcano Doc's so fancy when my goofy self on here.
Please. Please. Do you know what? Here, I'll make you feel better, Belant. I'll tell you a great story and you and chat will laugh your butts
Okay.
off. Okay, so like I'm super honky white girl. I grew up like not adventurous eating. My parents can't cook. So I grew up eating like fast food and boxed crap. Flash forward to when I'm in grad school, I a little bit more explored. I've met people in my life. I have friends from different cultures. And my roommate is from an Indonesian family. And so he's like really big on rice. And I started like eating a lot healthier and everything. And I really like it now. But I had never made rice when I was a kid. This is important. Now I eat a buttload of rice. And so when I was in Santa Barbara, I bought a rice cooker for the first time. And that's how I learned how to make rice. But I never used any other buttons on it. I would always just use the rice buttons. And so for like brown rice, I'd cook the brown rice button. For white rice, I'd click the white rice button. And yes, I wash my rice sushi. And then like if I was short on time, I'd click the button for quick rice. But I found out this weekend that the button for quick rice is not, in fact, when you just want your rice to be faster. There is actually rice that is already kind of pre-made and that it's like minute rice and then you just kind of like heat it. I didn't know that. I thought that it just took regular rice and did it faster. And
Yeah.
I had been eating rice kind of like not all the way made half the time in grad school. I was just like, this is weird. I'm just going to put more curry sauce on it and make it fine. And I found out literally, I was 38 years old when I found out that the quick rice button does not mean I'm going to take your regular rice and make it faster and just kind of crunchy. It is, in fact, an entirely different type of rice.
I mean, look, I would have thought the same thing. Because, like, right on the microwave, quick speed, quick
Right?
30, right? It nukes it, makes it faster. That makes sense to me.
I should say minute rice or instant rice, not quick rice. That just means you want your
Instant
done
rice.
faster.
Yeah. Exactly. Because, like, instant rice I know it's like a more generic brand name, right? That is like on so many more things. So it would, yeah. I'm with you. 100%.
Okay. Chats. Okay, yeah. So if you feel like you are ever dumb, I want you to remember this moment. The PhD. And I thought, first off, I was like 32 when I found out that you could use four-wheel drive in reverse. And I was 27 when I found out that archipelago is not pronounced archipelago. And I was this weekend years old when I found out that quick rice is not regular rice made faster. So, if you ever feel bad about yourself or that you're not good enough, remember this moment. Everybody is good at something. Not everybody is good at everything. And just because you're a big brain does not mean that you're good at all the things or that you know all the things or that you're smart about all the things. Exhibit A. I do some real dumb stuff.
It's but it's like one of those things. It's not dumb. It's just that we just, like you said, we're experts at our own thing.
Yeah.
Like I thought I saw the word kielbasa spelled out on a Tenacious D album, and my sister and I swore for years that it was pronounced kielbasa.
Kielbasa.
And we thought it was a totally different thing. And then it was like 10 years later, my sister texted me. She's like, dude, did you know that's actually the sausage that we cook? I'm like, no, you get out of here. And so, like,
It's taken me a long time to not say Ors divorce.
what is it?
Ors divorce?
Yeah.
How do you think that that's spelled? Ors divorce.
OARSDEVOR?
Hang on. Yeah. I think that's how I spell hors d'oeuvres. I say it hors de. Yeah. Like
Oh,
hors
hors d'oeuvres.
d'oeuvres. So I feel ya. I feel ya. I feel ya.
As Mike said, the Hungarian doesn't help on me. Where I'm like, I don't know, the phonetics are different,
That's I like Swahili because it's phonetic.
and it like obeys rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're a big reader as a kid, so there are any words you only read, and you finally heard them pronounced out loud. You were quite wrong. That's exactly it, yogurt. I feel like if you kind of teach yourself to read, you end up in that situation if you're like learning when you're learning English. I don't know about any other languages, but I don't know. But yeah. So Belin, I am interested in learning about microbes and volcanoes and how they're different from normal microbes because I found this really cool paper and I thought it would be really, really neat to talk about it with people in chat because I don't know anything about microbes. I don't know what's supposed to show up first, what's supposed to show up second, and things like that. And I'm hoping that you could tell me, like, what's going on when we have brand new volcanic islands because I read through this paper and it looks like there's some really cool stuff that doesn't normally happen when you have like new islands or new places.
Yeah, so like the order of operations seems off in this study. So y'all Doc kind of painted the picture, right, of there was this new island that was formed right from volcanic activity, and the researchers are trying to see what were the first bacteria that colonized the island. And there is this general feeling that the first thing that should colonize are some kind of photosynthetic cyanobacteria so that they can, they're near on top of the water or they're in a depth of water where there's still sunlight coming and they can do some kind of photosynthetic activity to synthesize oxygen, and it's like an easy way of processing for energy. But they found, I think, what they would be more likely to find a deep sea hydrothermal vents in terms of like the different flavors of bacteria, and that was super super surprising. So it was, if I'm looking like right at the paper of the different flavors that they found, let's see, they got 32 different samples across this particular site,
Mm-hmm.
and they found, yeah, I mean, I guess like the environment was a big difference too. That they found like there's high metal concentrations, low concentrations of nutrients, low concentrations of carbon, and so it's much more of these archaeo prokaryote bacteria that were like this ancestral state of doing different kinds of energy synthesis and different flavors of metabolism.
Yeah.
And so it just, to me, it reads as like what the more original state of bacterial isolation would be. Like if we were going back to primordial era.
What do you wait? So what do you mean by that? Like you're talking about like some of the first life on Earth, kind of maybe?
Like yeah, like early, like some of the, if we look at the evolutionary tree and think of like what came first in terms of bacterial evolution, it is not the cyanobacteria, right? It is not these photosynthetic ones. It's much more of these like really extremophile, different flavor of metabolically active bacteria that came through first, which makes sense, right? Because if there wasn't like carbon rich areas and already like places of oxygenation and other flavors of metabolic activity that can happen, then it makes sense that it would be these more extremophiles that would pop up.
Oh.
It was just surprising to me that I guess the way the island was formed lacked these like very, almost what we think of, I guess, would be standard molecules of like lots of carbon, and like, a good location for oxygenating bacteria. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I kind of took it, as I was surprising. It was like sulfur, like chemophiles, right? Like sulfur synthesizing and metabolizing bacteria, not carbon. And
Yeah.
so I was surprised. And so I guess maybe I'm reading too much into it. I know the authors were, to me, Doc seemed very pulled back and reserved on what the findings could be. But if you could make the argument that if this is how new land masses were formed during the formation of the planet,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a proxy for us and seeing like what kind of first life could have colonized a
I
given
don't think
island.
I don't think it's a far reach. I don't think it's a far reach because of the Earth's, early Earth's history. We were a giant magma ocean. We
Hmm.
don't know exactly when continental crust started to form, but it's pretty like the way that we get continental land masses now is we form these island archivolcanic chains and then they get accreted, like smushed onto continents or smushed together and build continents through through the process of plate tectonics. And so after millions of years of that, we probably end up with enough of a hunk of continental crust to actually have a persistent landmass, and then we can start having, you know, back, land masses that are not active volcanoes. So I think that maybe before we start having persistent, oh, hi, Bean, before we start having persistent continental crust, um, then we might, that maybe this is common.
Well, so looking back, because I was really curious as to why they thought that oxygenating like cyanobacteria should be coming early. Because right, how we're talking about it, it almost is like, well, why was this a surprise?
Yeah, I guess that's how I feel. I was like, well, it kind of makes sense to me, but I guess that if they normally form not this way, then okay.
Yeah, so I was perplexed because I'm like I can very easily not be surprised by this, but I guess like in some of the citations, they had papers that showed like oxygenated what we think tunnel trace fossils. So like there would be like a group of bacterial residue, and then these little tubes would be coming up in the fossils, and that was suggested to be like almost like off gassing. And so that the
Mm.
hypothesis had been that off gassing and the pattern of off gassing is remnant of some flavor of oxygenation happening, like with cyanobacteria.
Hmm. I've never thought that much. I don't really know. I guess the processes, biogeochemical stuff is like really starting to kind of be recognized now. Even like 5 or 6 years ago, we were like, oh no, minerals are inorganic, and now we know, well, there are bioorganic minerals like animals that make shells. They precipitate their shells, and those shells are calcite, but they are made by animals. And so we're starting to kind of see how biology and geology are interacting more and more the more studies we do and the more we can actually examine these teeny tiny things in rocks. But I've never thought about it, I guess.
Which they actually did in this paper too, right? They're measuring like the amount of organic compound in the sediment, right? Like how much carbon there is, and that's how like the whole beginning of the paper, right, is that there wasn't like a lot of that carbon, and that's I guess the reason why that you would say, well, that's why there's not these cyanobacteria because they need the carbon. And so it's really cool how the
Oh.
two interact, like you were saying, like that. Like I didn't realize that field wasn't very like old. I just assumed that that was something that had been going for a while.
No, no. Biogeochemistry is very young. It's like probably less than 40 years old.
Okay.
Definitely less than like, absolutely less than 50. I mean, we didn't even know about plate tectonics. Like, plate tectonics has only been around for like 60 years.
Oh, okay. I guess I assumed that it would be some like almost a foundational step, right, to measure these kinds of questions, and it's just kind of like I guess not surprising after our chat that we had on the crossover. It's like there's so much funding that isn't for some of these
Mm-hmm.
basic science questions that it's like, what do you mean that we don't know the composition of these rocks and like predicting the age? But it's so I guess in that naive lens, I thought it was really cool of these different texts coming out and like coming together for this study. It just makes it so the logical conclusions are indeed quite logical. Like there is lack of carbon here, therefore these carbon-based cyanobacteria that do the oxygenation cannot be there. And
Mm-hmm.
so what is there? There is sulfur. There are these sulfur metabolizers. Like it's really clean in that way. I mean, the only thing that I'm kind of like eyebrow raised is a little bit on the genetic side of things, but it's still like I think pretty cool.
Cool. Well, we've got some questions in chat. You want to go over those and we'll take a look at the paper?
Yeah, tell me which order you want to go in.
Let's do questions real quick. Hyperbole, you pronounced wrong in your head. I get that, Hoolery. Um, you have a related question, Kamishita. How do these microbes relate to pyrophilic plants? Belant, you take that one. I don't know anything.
I am gonna level with you, Doc. I don't know what a pyrophilic plant is.
A pyrophilic plant is one that requires fire in order to like reproduce. So like giant sequoias, usually their pine cones require fire or very high temperatures to open them so that they can disperse the seeds.
Okay.
That being said, Kamishita, probably not. I don't think so because that's carbon. And, as Belinda said, most of the bacteria that I guess they're thought of require carbon, but the ones that were found on the island don't use carbon. So they're completely different. These are probably more like the ones that like hydrothermal vents and black smokers underwater, which I think is a cool opportunity to look at that stuff without having it be obscured by water, being able to actually like sample it and not have to get rid of any seawater chemistry overprint or things like that, or have to deal with like how seawater or the presence of water might complicate things if you're under the ocean.
And everything's contained too, like you're saying, like it's not just gonna wash around.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sad part about losing this island is you could have looked at population dynamics over time, right? And seeing like maybe like I would have been curious to see in 10, 15, 20 years, do you start getting cyanobacteria?
Yeah.
Like, is there a change in the composition of this over time?
Well, there's lots of other islands around here that are gonna be coming up pretty soon. They're
But is it are they ones where like we've talked about like the financial investment will be there, and then also I guess now like I didn't even take this into account because it's not a variable in our lab, but like will the island still be there in X amount of
yeah,
time?
yeah. Sometimes your field areas no more.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah. That's something we think about, but not. I think a lot of other places don't think about.
No, that has never crossed my mind. Oh, I wonder if this will still be here.
Yep. So, is it safe to say before any other creatures that existed on Earth, bacteria is the first life on Earth? What do you think, Belinda?
Oh, this gets into the dirty old question of what is life. And that's I'm not being just facetious there, like of where you define the original life form, because you need certain molecules in order to be able to create what we think of as life today. And so like there's this whole theory of the RNA based world, right, where RNA is both having information on a genetic level, but it also has enzymatic activity, so it can cluster together, it can cause there to be reactions to occur. There's like different regions of it that we know are able to run these chemical reactions. And so would you call something that has RNA therefore life, which is like a virus, which that's the thing on our stream we always get into, whether or not that's a real, like, is that alive or not?
Mm.
Because it's that parasitic. And there is this whole like group of argumentation that at one point it was not a parasitic organism, but rather it's undergone gene loss and now it's dependent on other things. And so, right, that
That's
I think,
I haven't even thought of it. I was just all like, yeah, bacteria, because that's like tiny, right? Jeez.
yeah, well, no, but and that's something to think about too, right? Is like a proxy of genome size could be a sign of simplicity, and it could be something that could have been earliest. But we do know some viral genomes are super super small. But then it gets into, well, is it super small because they have undergone gene loss, or is it because that was the original thing, and maybe at the time of appearance in the world, it was in a environment where it didn't need to siphon off from other organisms because there were maybe factors in the water or what have you that allowed them to survive. Like there is this theory that like nucleotides or the building model of life was just in this primordial soup, as it were, right? And
Yeah.
so I know I'm like totally jumping and avoiding the question, Brick Lane, and I'm not trying to like squirrely, but just it's one of those where I think it's a really hard question to answer.
It's like the if hot is a hot dog a sandwich? Well, first you have to define what a sandwich is.
And same with like species, right? Like for us, that is a moving goalpost depending on what field you're in. And so it's like we like scientists as a whole can't agree on what a species is. And so like then that's what makes it even harder, right? Then it's like if now we're defining life, which I think is even a more complicated question, right? Because there's so many criteria that you can be like, well, it needs to be able to reproduce on its own. Would you then discount parasitic wasps, which are clearly alive and
But
fluttering around?
they require inhabiting something else, and yeah.
Exactly. And so it's just it's hard. It's hard to answer, Bricklane. It's hard to answer,
I
but I think
think
it's a really good question.
it's a good question. I think it's good also that we're having these conversations and showing that, but like even within scientists, like between even within it's there's so many unknowns and nuances and little like that just you really have to think about what studies are saying and what you know what are the conclusions and think about them critically, I guess is the best
And
way.
and to be clear, not everyone does what Volcano Doc and I are doing now. There's a lot of like, this is my opinion and therefore it's right mentality. And I think it's much better to have this conversation, even if it's like the paper you're publishing is under a different set of rules and definitions. It's still important, I think, to acknowledge these other definitions because I think even if you're not going to use them, it gets you thinking about the science of like, well, why don't I think that these definitions are appropriate for my own?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a good point. Hey, Penn Center, welcome. But scientists are assuming it's not originating in a vacuum of life this time, like new things would just float in from the modern ocean. Ariel is asking that.
Yeah, so like in this study, it was just what like Volcanodoc said from like the hydrothermal vents is where these bacteria are presumably originating from. So it's not like a brand new life formation happening, but rather it's just collection of existing things. So Ariel, it's more like what colonizes this new island first? That's like the question. Like what kind of environmental setup do we have that lets there be something to live on the island, right? And
Hmm.
so it's the hypothesis had been, well, a new island, you should have some kind of cyanobacteria that can oxygenate, and that'll like that's the first thing that needs to colonize, and then other creatures can come. And it seems like the order is different, and unfortunately, we never got the cyanobacteria because the island went away.
Yeah. Splodies. The Splodies ruined it. But
That video you showed and the side image, the side view, like the overhead shot, and like that's wild to me. Like it, what? So when you say it exploded, like did the landmass launch and just like shatter or like what happened to the island?
um, I can show you a model that is from a paper that passed peer review that I reviewed. Um, give me. Do I have it here? Maybe I don't. I know it's on YouTube. Um, do, 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 do. Um, oh man, come on, where are you? Tsunami model. Here we go. Ingomar. This is. Here we go. Well, I'm pulling this up. I'm going to screen share. Somebody asked, who was it? Smikes asked, how do they think the earthquake of 1908 happened without plate tectonics? So they knew we, they didn't know that plates moved like and subducted and that drove big earthquakes. They thought that like maybe the Earth's crust like went up and down and like that there was some type of like movement. But we didn't know what it was. They just didn't know what. Um, yeah, that's my best guess. That's the big scientific journal. We have like science and nature, and then after that there is geology, which is like there's geology, and then it just kind of depends like JVGR, things like that. Oh, this is not working. Oh, here we go. Show on stream. Yes, push through. Cool. Alrighty. So this is a model. This is one of the co-authors of this study. He is at UC Santa Cruz and he does tsunami modeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so this paper that I studied, they used tsunami arrival times at places throughout the world, and then also like tidal gauges in the near field, which is in Tonga, at other islands, to model the, like, to estimate the power of the explosion and model the number of explosive events and their strengths. And
Mhm.
what was particularly cool about this model is that the first author studies like shallow marine wave interactions, and so you can, like, it was really notable because one, it constrained the energy of the explosion, but also you can look at how the waves interact when they come and wrap around the back of the islands, and it shows that even though the tsunami may have arrived on one side, there's still a lot of like back wave interaction, and you can have tsunami waves arriving from all directions when you're in this shallow, shallow marine environment. So there were three main explosions. The first one, I think, was a half a megaton of TNT. And the second was 2 megatons of TNT. The third and largest one was 15 megatons of TNT. So this is the first one, right? And you can see, like, really, I'm gonna play this like super slow, actually. Playback speed. Okay. So that's the first one, right? And then you'll watch for the second one. Look at how big the third one is, though.
Wow. So
that was just the second one. Never mind.
the explosion site that we just saw there, that's where the island was. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So here is this. It goes over really well. Like, over the past month, like, the volcano kept growing and growing. So that's probably why you didn't get an opportunity for cyanobacteria to develop, because you have repeated eruptions, right?
During that like 4-year period. I see. Okay. So you're constantly replenishing like the sulfur or like the other components that survive, like, and therefore the bacteria that survive on them, versus if you got any carbon sink starting, you'd be replacing it every time.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
So would you say then the ideal island to have done this study would have been one that formed and then you turn off the volcanic activity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You'd need one like this where you have a, vent right about the ocean-air interface. And then once you build up this island, though, you need it to not erupt again for some, probably 50, 100 years or so, I think might be enough time to get something good going. I mean, 10 definitely
I guess
is
that's the
not.
hard part, right? We don't know.
Yeah, we just don't know.
Yeah.
So, again, this is the picture of the eruption the day before. This is the small one the day before, the tiny one, which is pretty insane to think about.
Is this tiny one, would the island have survived just from this tiny?
No, this is so.
Okay. It's already like wiping out everything.
Yeah, I'm going here. Yeah, so this is in 2014. This is what we're starting with, right? So we've got. Oh, I was wrong. This is Hunga Tonga. This is Hunga Ha'apai. Then we start, in 2014, it starts to form. We get some little bit of land bridge. It like washes away, but you get enough volcanism that you get a persistent island. There's actually a geology paper published in 2015 about this, because we were like, oh God, it's a brand new island, and it hasn't washed away yet. Because normally they wash away pretty rapidly. And you do need that sustained volcanism. I think there's another volcano a little ways over. It's the next closest one. It is. Where are we? Come on. This guy, Tofua. Tofua had like a 120-meter tall tsunami that raised half of the life off the island. And I think that if you were to look there, it's still an active volcano. Tofua is very, very active. It has the capacity to form these large caldera-building volcanoes. But you have this half of the island where all vegetation's been removed by this tsunami. So that could be a spot.
The tsunami that removed it was the
This
one caused by the explosion that we were talking about today.
on an adjacent island, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that
So that
might
would
do
be
it.
that
But
would be interesting. I wonder if what information are you getting from like that this island that we started looking at, was recently formed by volcanic activity versus being cleared by ocean, right? It's like I wonder if that'll give you different populations of colonizers as well, like of like how fresh the volcanic activity is, like what are the sediments deposited, like what are the compounds, organic or inorganic, that can be metabolized by those bacteria.
ooh,
Like I wonder if just like if it's and this is my naivete to the field, if it's a tsunami, will you might bring up some hydrothermal bacteria, but will you bring up some like throughout you know the different strata of water, and so like actually helping the variable colonization. That's your
I
expertise,
didn't think
Doc.
about that. I didn't think about that. I never think. I guess I didn't think. I. This is so interesting having this discussion because yeah, it's very, that stuff I don't even think about. I'm like, there's no bacteria in the water. I mean, of course there is. Of course there is. That's crazy. I've never thought about
Well,
that.
that's why the crossover is fun, right? Because both of us are so distant fields, and yet so we're thinking about it really really differently. But that's like the fun part. It's like this is how really good science can happen. It's
Yeah,
bringing together different fields.
exactly. Was all life on the island and in the water wiped out? I mean, I would say everything on this was probably gone. I don't think there's anything. I mean, these little bits of Hunga Tonga and Hunga Hapai survived. So there's
Mhm.
probably stuff on that, but that's it.
So if you were to look at those zones that did survive,
Hmm.
is that basically a restart from like the 2016, 2015 time where it's like that new area formed?
No, these little islands, these have lasted several thousand years. This is
Okay.
these by looking at the stratigraphy, the layers on these islands, that's how we know that the last caldera forming eruption was about 1,000 years ago, and that there's
Gotcha.
different eruptions during, like in between caldera forming events. But for this volcano, it's had two big events like this about every 1,000 years. And that was preserved. Those are preserved in Hunga Tonga's and Hunga Ha'apai's stratigraphy. Um,
Nice. Okay.
for whatever
Really
reason,
cool.
these parts of the rim, they're just more competent. They're stronger. They've
Mm.
survived more and more eruptions, and so that hot ash just kind of serves to harden and build it up and reinforce it. So I'm not saying another eruption couldn't take them out, but they're probably pretty persistent if they've survived this long. It could also be the way that the vent is oriented.
Hmm.
Um, maybe it's like not quite. It blew this whole thing to smithereens. I don't know. It wasn't really angled. That's the thing. It wasn't really angled. It was really symmetrical. It was like maybe like 10 degrees from normal. It was like stupidly vertical, which is really
Is that
weird.
not normal?
Not for the Earth. No, everything's always funky.
Okay.
It's
So and that would influence, like you said, I guess the direction of the explosion, like how much it's tilted one way or another.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So I
Like
guess
Mount St. Helens was tilted, so that's why it had a lateral blast
uh-huh.
first. So
So the two surviving islands that you said doing, been here for a long time. If they I wonder what happened, like what state they're in now in terms of what were they covered like
yeah,
with,
ash,
like in
pyroclastic,
terms of,
nothing would have survived. Maybe
so then
bacteria.
is that a good place to look?
Yes.
So like maybe that would be the next step too, is that on this site to look at those two islands, 'cause it's almost like you've had a restart.
It would be a good place, and I think that you might not find these weird chemophile bacteria on top of these two islands because they are surviving. And now the vent now is like way below the surface, way like 600
Mhm.
meters below the surface. So we won't have another big event like this anytime soon. Um,
Like, yeah, so I guess the question is then what's living, if anything, right now on those two islands?
mm-hmm,
I would be interested to see if we could look at the composition of what's living on those two islands and
mm-hmm.
compare it to what was found in this paper. like in the terms of the population, see like, I guess the dream scenario in my mind would be like it's the same population set,
Mm-hmm.
and then trace it over the next 50, 60, I don't know how often you would need to look, right? But maybe every X number of years sampling and see how that population shifts.
Yeah.
If it already has cyanobacteria on these two little islands, then we'd be, I don't think it would help. But given like how you're saying about the explosion and like the ash that's covering it, it naively I'd assume that it's being covered with the compounds that would help these
Yes.
archaeobacteria, these extremophiles survive, like the sulfur metabolizing and yeah.
I mean, what temperatures can this stuff survive? Like, can regular not extremophile bacteria survive? Because these pyroclastic deposits, they're gonna be, well, the biggest explosion on the tsunami model literally clears the seafloor. Like it pushes the ocean away from the island, and you have bare seafloor for about 12 seconds. So that's why I'm like, I don't think anything can survive this. But like, so that being said, like anything within 20 kilometers, a human would have been deceased by the shockwave of the explosion.
That's
And
crazy to think about.
yeah,
Right, because you think like a volcano, you're like, oh, I'll melt, but the shockwave
gets
would
you
like
before.
like how
Before.
that's crazy cool, like terrifying, but crazy cool that there's something that powerful
Yeah.
from the shockwave naturally occurring on our planet.
Yeah. I think that's why I like volcanoes. They're just so amazing. Like, exactly. NME is the same concept for the grenades. It is the exact same concept. Yes, it's the chemistry. Because when magma and water come into contact, if they come into contact fast enough that you don't build up this like Leidenfrost steam layer to protect, like, to kind of keep them from coming into contact with each other, it's called molten fuel coolant interaction, MFCI. It's basically a nuclear explosion. Same chemistry. Same chemistry. And that's why you get this massive shockwave, because you are making a giant nuclear bomb just naturally.
So I guess to connect it to the question that you always get, which is what would happen if I peed in a volcano, the better question would be, what if I got a lot of people to pee in a volcano at the same time? It would be a nuclear pee bomb.
Um, so I think the only way that that would work, and I'm actually like being very serious here, the only way that that would work would be if the rate of urine expulsion was fast enough to prevent formation of a Leidenfrost layer. Like that has to be it. The fluid coming out, like the interaction has to happen in such a quick, like such a quick time period, like milliseconds of milliseconds, that you don't have time for the liquid to make that phase change to a gas. It just goes right into a supercritical fluid. So, I mean, depending on how powerful they peed,
So if you're holding
you
your
can
pee
make this
for a
into
few
a
hours,
TikTok, Mikes. Yes, sorry.
so yeah, if you're like having a lot to drink before, and then you're holding your pee, right, and then it's just like, in theory, you could make a pee nuke.
In theory, if you were to probably get a whole lot of people, I don't know, we could. I mean, I think if I were to like sit down and think about it and figure out and like do the research and figure out the equations, we could probably figure out how many people it would take. I'm not that good at math right now. It's a little too early. Um, but I
Thank you
think
for humoring me on that question. But
no, it's a great question. It's a great question. Is this ever a sentence I thought I'd say, Volcano Doc? NME, do you have children? I have a child, and I stopped thinking if I wasn't going to say things the long time ago. Like, no, you can't keep a booger wall behind your bed.
oh my god! Oh no!
Like, yeah,
Oh no!
yeah, the booger wall. Watch out for the booger wall. Got to check behind the bed. They're going to go like this and then wipe it on the wall.
Oh god!
Kids do gross stuff, man. You don't understand why pee would
You
trigger a
can't-
nuclear explosion? Because it's just liquid. It's generally, so the physics of it comes from when you have a liquid that's heated enough that instead of going like you know, when you go from a liquid to a gas, that's a lot of energy, right? And so if you don't even get to that state, you go to just like a supercritical fluid, and then it gets like, the volume expansion is huge. The volume expansion is absolutely huge. Honestly, Smikes, there probably are some atoms splitting. I mean, the water's being blasted into, from a supercritical fluid into a vapor. You probably are splitting some water atoms at that point, truthfully. And I think that is what makes it so powerful of an explosion, because you don't have that protection. You have the water being split apart into its different atoms. Yeah. Oh my God, Arya. We'll put that in clips. You had a collection on the backside of your nightstand as a kid, Jim, of boogers. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Is there a volcano currently on Earth where we can try this? Lava lakes are very rare. There are a few persistent lava lakes around the globe, Smikes. One would be, Nyiragongo in Democratic Republic of Congo, I believe, has a persistent lava lake. Mount Erebus in Antarctica does. That would be a really fun place to try it, because we could see, like, can you pee strong enough so that the pee would trigger a volcanic eruption, but not freeze before it hits the lava? Yeah, there we go, Smikes. There's a real thermodynamic problem. How strong do you have to pee for the pee not to freeze en route to the magma, where it has to be still going real fast? You'd probably have to increase the rate of pee extrusion, I think.
Because as it's cold, it's going to be slowing down as it is. So even if you had a really fast coming, like powerful stream, like good healthy prostate, for example,
yeah,
it's still going to slow down from the cold.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the air temperature is a factor in this. Very true. We should get to this paper.
Even, you know what? Honestly, even if it's a theoretical exercise,
it's fun though. It's good to think about it,
right? And it gets people like curious of like, right? Because you've said that's a question that you get all the time.
I do.
What happens if I pee in a volcano?
I do.
And if you tell me you make a nuke,
it was enough. All right, enough people.
Yeah, it's like, I'm in. All right, let's make a pee nuke.
Yes, Smikes. Any liquid should work. Any liquid should work. Any liquid should work. You think you should drop frozen pee from a plane? I think it would work the same. You'd go straight from a solid to a supercritical fluid.
I mean, I guess you wouldn't have the loss of life as well, but that's Sparky. The visual of a plane dropping frozen pee is not as funny as a circle of people standing around an open lava lake
trying to summon the goddess, but very poorly. Oh, you can't pee with others watching.
That's all right,
like a you problem.
We'll have the eclipse glasses. It's fine.
Yeah, just everybody will have the cataract glasses and just all close your eyes and in unison, like, okay. Alrighty. Now that we have answered, I'm actually really glad. This is a fun. I like these questions. They're fun. They're fun. You're no longer suited for this experiment. That's okay. So we are. Hi, VR30. Welcome. So I want to know more about how this works, Bulent, because when you read through this, have you heard of a Surtsayan Island at all?
Is this a different paper or is this the same one?
This is the same one.
The header looked a little... Oh, okay. You just have a different header on it than my file. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I look at stuff in PDF format because I'm a crazy person and I don't like.
No. I was like, where's like the colors on top? Okay, gotcha.
I am like right here. One of the most dramatic examples of microbial colonization occurs after creation of new land, usually a volcanic eruption. But on occasion, volcanoes can form new land masses, and so usually, like the Big Tonga eruption. Like this one, this is not a Surtsayan eruption. A Surtsayan eruption is like the day before, basically, or like, yeah, this is January 15th. So this is kind of like a Cert Saiyan type eruption. Let me YouTube it, actually. It'll be better. Yeah, so this is Krakatoa. Not Krakatoa. This is like the new volcanic cone in the center of Krakatoa, basically. And so you can see like this is a small eruption. Sorry about the words. You've got
No.
some pyroclastic flows starting to come down the mountain. And then it destroyed the cone.
Mm-hmm.
And so now see how like go back down. Yeah. So after the cone was erupted away, it blasted away the cone. This is probably what would have happened like right before the big eruption. Like during that time when you had the landmass in the middle and in the middle of the landmass goes away. This is probably what's going on. You have like a blast to get rid of the cone, your vent relocates underground, and you have a Saiyan style eruption is magma and water, but you have way more water than magma. And so you get just kind of like wet ash blasts up. Slug Biker, there was, yes, so this did generate a tsunami. This generated a tsunami that did kill people because the Indian Ocean tsunami warning system was built to sense tsunamis generated by earthquakes, not landslides. So unfortunately, but this is a Cert Saiyan style eruption. This is what usually would be the kind of eruption that would cover land masses, and then you would get this new like thermophilic or extremophile bacteria. So this
and I wonder then with like, because that's different from the one we're looking at, right?
That's different from the one that blasted the island to smithereens.
Yeah.
Before, like while the island's forming, and the whole like 8 years the island's forming, this is what you'll get. So this,
yeah. So
this
then that makes sense. Like I wonder if it's a concentration question too, like how much water is mixing with the lava, right? In order for you to have like, you're diluting it down, right? So it's not just like that really high concentration of sulfur and everything else, but you have like, you're almost setting it up to be able to be colonized by aquatic bacteria.
Yeah, that's, when you were just saying that, I was just thinking that, like the thermophilic bacteria that they found on Hungatonga, I call it HTHH. Sorry, I'm a lazy person and I study it, and we just say HTHH because it's a Hungatonga Hunga-Apai is a mouthful every time. It is. But so would those? We've got our vent underwater. We've got lots of like sulfur, like heavy metals, stuff like that, and these thermophilic bacteria down near the vent that's underwater. Do you think that this explosion, bringing it up with the wet ash and then depositing that, is that more likely how you would get cyanobacteria, or or not the thermophilic bacteria? Or do you think that they would like migrate up through the ash as well? Like, what do you think is the most likely route to getting these, bacteria that usually exist in hydrothermal vents up here above the ground? Because maybe that's it.
Yeah, that like of why it's that these are colonizing over the cyano. So I mean, reading about these extremophiles, right? To them, our environment is extreme, right? So they are specialized in this particularly what we think is inhospitable area to live. But as soon as we take them out of that setting and put them in an area that we do well in, they die.
That's true. That's true.
And so with that in mind, like my thinking was that they actually just came up with the ash and the water together. So it's almost like I'm bringing up a pocket of environment that you're going to do well in, so that you can survive and continue to survive. And as soon as that pocket of environment is depleted, which will happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they'll eventually, like, those sulfur metabolizing components, like bacteria, will eventually like run out of sulfur. If we turn off the volcano, no more ash, nothing, they will eventually run out.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
so that's always like with the deep sea missions that I've been reading about and we've been chatting about on the stream. It seems like a difficulty of studying these animals, not just the bacteria, but like the other animals living down that deep, is replicating the environment in which they live in the lab. And
Mm.
so my assumption is that that would be a similar thing in the wild too. Like you'd have to replicate an environment in which they're doing well in, which
Yes.
for them means not high levels of oxygen, not like carbon sinks, but these other kinds of compounds. And presumably there's like, I'd be really curious in seeing as the temperature changes on this island right after you formed different amounts, are you actually losing populations?
That's a
Right?
good question. That's a really good question. Um, mm, yeah, I bet you do. I
Because
bet
that
you
would be
do.
that's like a faster metric of like the loss of the sulfur, right? So like the ones that require a certain amount of heat to survive in, as soon as you start cooling to a certain level, in theory, they should start dying off, and you should start getting something else that will overtake that population niche that's left behind.
What if you don't have eruptions though, but you don't turn off the volcanism? Because even if you don't have, we've talked about this a little bit when I was on your stream, how a magma has to be eruptible. So like if you have greater than like 40 or 50% crystals in your magma, which many magmas in arc systems and continents are stored mushy. We now know this. Where's I going with that? Oh yeah. So let's say that your magma is like just not eruptible, but it's cooling. If your magma is shallow enough, if it's within like 200 or 300 meters of the surface, sulfur will continue to degas as that magma's there. It just because the sulfur degases or devolatilizes at a certain depth and pressure.
Mhm.
So would a cooling magma body that's off gassing stuff like sulfur and hydrogen sulfide and like hydrofluoric gases, do you think that that would be enough to sustain some to provide at least some component of their native habitat?
Yeah, and it's a really cool question, right? Because it gets you at an argument of thresholding and also of like what the most important like feature of their environment is to them. Because like you said, even if you have the off gassing, right, you have that component, but you don't have temperature and you don't have pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the question of, well, which is the most important? And these are like, they survive in these extreme conditions, and maybe you could parse out, the thresholds. Like they can do kind of okay with, as long as they have this concentration of sulfur or whatever have you, that it's off gassing, and at the same time the pressure has gone, you know it's a lot less pressure, and they're still kind of hobbling along. Like you might be able to get something like that. And then if you have them survive for enough generations, presumably you'll start seeing evolution happening too, like
Mm-hmm.
on a natural selection scale, where there's some mutants that were already kind of better at a lower pressure, that were down there and they were hobbling along, and now it's that population that takes off.
Life's so cool. That's really cool. I do prefer my inanimate objects because they tend to follow rules a little bit better. Not always, but a little better, but they're cool. What is off gassing? That's a great question, Smikes. Not ignorant at all. Off gassing is literally what it sounds like. When a magma body is at a certain pressure, there are different volcanic gases in it. And those different gases reach solubility. So they might like think about like if you're shaking up a pop bottle and undoing it. That's like what off gassing kind of is. The gas comes out of solution, right? And so it forms a vapor bubble. And then if you were to like take off the top so that the gas could come out of the bottle, that's off gassing. So carbon dioxide tends to saturate at very deep depths. So you get a high CO2 peak when your magma is down deeper. As you decrease the pressure, you tend to have lost most of your CO2, And then you start to saturate with water and losing water. And then once you get to really shallow depths, you start to off gas your sulfur. So yeah, that's a great question. You're very welcome. Not at all dumb. Yeah, so that's. I thought I would ask about the cert sand stuff, Bullet, because I thought
No,
that would be pretty
it's
cool.
really cool, and I like. I'm sorry I don't actually have like good answers for you, but it's just in looking at the literature, it's like they're just difficult things to study.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm biased in how I want to see something studied versus how like you've seen something studied or how Danny sees something studied. Is it because of like what the strengths and weaknesses of our respective fields are? And like for me, I'm like I want to control every variable in the labs, like having like I want to like build the little volcanic island in the lab. It's like you're adding in different doses of sulfur and like those elements to see and thresholding the pressure, see which variable is important. But we don't know,
You
right? And so
can do that. We have rock standards. We have powdered rock standards like BHVO and BHVO2 are Hawaiian basalts. There are standard rock compositions, and you can buy them, and then you can melt them and make your own lava. So if you wanted to do that in the lab, you probably could.
that's really cool. I
You can
think it
even
would be.
They even come with like standard measurements of this is your concentration of sulfur, lead, vanadium, cobalt, because we measure all those things. They're all very important to us. So you probably could do that experiment.
I guess in my vision of that, you would need a very interdisciplinary lab,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we're almost talking about a lab that I don't know exists today because you'd have to have something that's really good at the microbiology side of things, really good at the geology side of things, and then have the money to build the equipment to be able to do that measurement. Presumably, like I would want a sequencer, I would want a mass spectrometer, at least from my side of things. I'm sure you would have like equipment that you would want to make sure that this is controlled. So we're probably talking like $1 billion startup to get this. But I think in the dream experiment, it could be a huge amount of information,
Oh yeah, yeah.
like foundational life kind of information
You
stuff
might
that we
even
could
be
use.
able to figure out like stuff. Well, that's probably going to make more news. I'm more of like, ooh, what do microbes do to metals, and like how can they get rid of stuff? Because that's something else that people study is how do microbes like eat oil and get rid of toxins and can be used to help clean up our human messes and things like that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You could pee in lava in the lab. Have a good night, Daniel. Thank you so much. And welcome so much, Ramon Online 79. Welcome. How are you? We have Balint on today. Science, if you guys are not already following him, which I'm sure you all are, do go give him a follow right now. Right now. It's him and his lovely wife, Lita, will be streaming tonight, doing Lita's grab bag science as Balint and the Munchkin sleep. Yes, go follow him.
Sleep. I'll be catching up on some video games.
Okay. I was giving you the benefit of the doubt.
I know, I know. I appreciate you.
I was
Thank
giving
you,
you the
Doc.
benefit of the doubt. So, with these sampling sites, what do you think about this? Do you think that just from, and I know we've both read the paper, but let's assume that we have not.
Mhm.
What do you think the differences would be in the bacteria from these sampling sites? Like, what would you, going into and planning out your expedition to sample these, what would you expect? Why would you have chosen these sites if you were the PI here?
So that's a good question, and there are different colors here, right? Like there is there the degree different color dots for the chat. There's like beach environments in blue, which are a little bit hard to see.
Mm-hmm.
There's some green ones that are on the vegetative side, which are also hard to see on the map. I get why we picked the color, but and then there's the yellow, which is like the new island form, right? And so
We're not the best graphic designers, man.
I that's why what is it nowadays? The
Color contrast checker?
well, there's that we should use, but it's that biorender that everyone uses for biology. So it's like clip art for biological sciences, and so then it's just like you're just going off of someone else's images, and it's like one step above the AI art because now it's just everything's cookie cutter, and you don't even like notice figures anymore.
Bummer.
Like, you know. So I guess naively, right, as you're going closer towards the cone, you would be maybe getting differences in the concentrations of some of these compounds,
Mm-hmm.
like different, like because if there, you know, is constant flow or there's constant ash, or depending on the dynamics of the island, you might be getting, you know, different amounts of sulfur. So maybe as you move further and further away, you'd be more likely to get some of those oxygenating carbon-based bacteria, like those
Okay.
cyanobacteria, is what I would naively think. But the paper made it seem like, with the surprise, that they were expecting it all over.
Hmm. I mean, I think that sounds reasonable to me. That the further you get away from the cone, the more, like, the less volcanic component you would get. That seems very reasonable. This is also for chat. This is inset. This is what the island looked like in 2010. So this is what it looked like before the island formed, which is similar to what it looks like now. You know, we'll probably get this opportunity again, just not during our lifetime, probably in about like 800 years.
Yeah, because you were saying like 1,000 years
Yeah.
roughly is how often.
Yeah, it takes about 1,000. It's about every about 1,000 years. You know, it's not going to happen, but you know, if you've got two in the rocks and then we got another, it's pretty. You know, it's like not guaranteed, but it's pretty expected, not unexpected. Yeah.
I'd be curious in, so those green dots,
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually stupid curious about them now.
Mm-hmm.
Like after the eruption, what is the composition of those?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Because presumably, like on how you're describing of what happened, that should have changed the composition of that vegetation, if not gotten rid of all
It
the
would have
vegetation.
gotten rid. I think it got rid of it. I believe. Yeah, because look, it's all scraped. Well, half of Hungaha Pai isn't even existing. Like Hungaha Pai used to be this big a strip, and now look at it.
Okay, so
So
that's not a pseudo color
no, this
orange.
is not a pseudo color image. This is completely stripped of vegetation.
Okay. So see, that's what would interest me now, is because that would be a nice before and after as well. If our hypothesis is correct that there should be these oxygenating bacteria on the vegetative side of things, maybe you would now see those replaced by the bacteria that we found that were in the cone region. These like sulfur eating bacteria. And that would kind of, I think, lead to the argument like that they're kind of making of like, well, what are the first colonizers to this thing?
Yeah, that's a
Like
good
it,
point.
and it's just going about it in a different way, right? Instead of a new island forming like between these two, instead of like that, it's just like, well, you've essentially
Hit restart.
from a, yeah, from like a biodiversity standpoint, you've restarted the island.
How how deep do microbes go though? We've had talks about like microbes, like just you know when I'm in chat and like you and Lito were talking about hydrothermal systems, and I think this is why I was like, oh, we should really talk about volcanoes and microbes because I'd learn a lot. Um, but aren't there microbes that live in the pore spaces of rocks, right?
Hmm.
And and I assume if there's microbes in water, then underwater, right? So like the because this volcano extends way underwater, right? There's probably microbes in the pore spaces of rocks underwater.
Right.
So my question is, prior to the 2022 eruption, like how far into the earth do microbes exist in the pore spaces of rocks? I know that they're in soils, they're in the top soils because that's why soils are productive. But then down past like the soil rock interface, like in bedrock, are there still microbes? The reason I ask is because I'm wondering if there were microbes that are in layers that had been like lithified and turned into rock that then got exposed when this got blasted away. See, and so like maybe these were in the middle of Hungahapai
Hmm.
thousands of years ago and now they're exposed. Like, would they have survived? Would they still be existing? Would that, like you see where I'm going with this, and I can't formulate all
Yeah,
these questions, and we don't know how to answer them, but I'm just spitballing here.
I think that's a great question. It's one where my understanding is that at all kinds of crazy depths, you're going to be getting microbial life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like in the Mariana Trenches, like at the very bottom, you're still getting life, and
Yes.
you're still getting bacterial life. In these mineral deposits, the survivability of these organisms isn't dependent on, pressure or temperature, because we've seen that they're able to survive those, but
Mm-hmm.
like mineral availability. And we don't know what level of evolution is going on and natural selection in these mineral deposits. Like if those bacteria are still going, if you've had them in there for a million years and they haven't been exposed to the heat and maybe sulfur concentrations that you've been getting from like their original state of like deep, deep, deep in the ocean, I don't know. I mean, they might go away right away as soon as like they're covered with the ash, because it's just such a shock to their system that they're no longer adapted to survive on that. So I think it would be cool if we like, if you could blast off part of that island and see into that mineral layer without actually doing the heat and the change in
All the things
that
needed to
layer.
do that, Yeah.
Yeah, like because I think that's going to be having a strong effect on these organisms biology as well. Like just that layer removal could expose them, but then you're covering it with, like you said, the ash and like your different sulfur concentrations, phosphorus, like all these different things are
Mm-hmm.
now covering it, and so you're changing that layer that the bacteria would have been good in to survive.
Yeah. Okay.
Is my take on it. I don't know. What do you think?
No, that makes sense. I don't know the tolerability of microbes, so I don't have any gauge for what they can stand. I guess I'm thinking of like, in my I think, oh God, what, like, how can you even survive a hydrothermal event? You have to be incredibly adapted. So at that point, I'm just like, well, you can survive anything probably. There's tardigrades. Like, who knows?
I guess I view them as microbes as some of the fastest evolving organisms, because their life cycle is usually so short
Mm-hmm.
that, and they just divide, and it's constantly going, going, going. And so there is the likely, with that speed comes the likelihood of error in reproduction of the
Mm.
DNA, which makes variants, which allows them to adapt to things fast.
Okay.
And so if they're in a strata for millions of years separated from that original habitat, I'm gonna think quickly they've, adapted to that region now really well to
They're
do
not gonna.
well in that particular environment, and
Mm.
have maybe at the sacrifice of doing well in their original one millions of years ago, because millions of years on our time scale
Is.
is different for a bacteria,
Yeah.
because in terms of like generation time and like accumulation of mutations and
Mm-hmm.
selection. And so that's the perspective that I'm coming from with it.
Okay. Hmm. Hi, Forever Cat. How are you? I am well. We have science on stream. We're talking about microbial colonizers of volcanoes. Welcome in. So what did they find? They collected 32 samples from sea level to the summit of the crater. And this is something that is different. Oh no, we have an ad. Okay, well, let's not talk with the ad. Please hold during ad. We thank you for your science. Go get a cookie. I need to have like a thing like you have that's like, oh, an ad's gonna come up. Go do something.
Oh, so if you add it, if you're
Seribot.
in, so you have, I know you have Siribot added,
Uh
but there is a command if you go into Siribot's channel.
huh. Uh huh.
I think you type like exclamation point add
Uh
or
huh.
something like that.
And it'll like,
It'll automatically add that command.
sweet.
So
Thank
you
you.
don't like, it doesn't even, you just, yeah, go into their stream, you type exclamation point that to add that command, and then you're set. I think it's a nice thing to have in there,
Yeah.
that
I
it's
I
upcoming.
I feel so bad. I hate it, but like also I don't, because I don't want to ask people to sub because I know like
Well, but
money's tight for
you have, I
everybody.
think you have to look at it in a different way too. Like we're also trying to make a livelihood out of this, and
Yeah.
it's a show, right? As much as we want to say that we're just going live, it is a production. Like you've got lighting, you've got sound, you've got all this stuff, and it's it is technically a free service, then it's like watching a few minutes of ads for that free content is, I think, okay, and it doesn't mean that not everyone needs, no one needs to sub. It's just, oh, there it is.
Ad
It's ad.
timer. Thank you so much, Smikes. Thank you so much. Yeah,
And so
that's like, oof.
I think people forget sometimes that we are trying to make like we never we never push about the financial element of it, but it is something where you want to make a living off it, so it means a lot to streamers for y'all to watch the ads. And
Yeah, it does. I know, like I even when my husband has YouTube TV and I just forget about commercials. I just watch them because I'm just so used to. I'm old. And so the concept, and like I also never paid for cable. I might have had it, but I never paid for it. And like so the concept of like being able to skip things is just like I'm just like um add some digits to that, Smikes, my darling. I love you so much. Add many digits. But like, yeah, I just, to me, like, I'm just like, oh, it's a commercial. I just kind of tune out my brain, go to the bathroom, get a drink, get a cookie, come back. You
yeah,
know,
it's like I would love to sub to
to
all of
everybody
our
if I could,
friends.
dude.
I would like, because like in my mind it's supporting people's dreams as well. Like I want nothing more than our friends who want this to be full time to be able to do it and be successful at it. But
Mm-hmm.
I just like cannot physically sub to everyone, and so
Mm-mm.
I'm like, I'm happy to watch the ad.
Mm-hmm. Oh
It's like
yeah.
knowing that it'll support. I know it's not a lot, but it's like I'm happily sit through and watch it. I can
Also,
catch up.
also, I don't know about you. I live in a hole, so sometimes that's the only way I know about things. Like ad, like oh, there's an ad for a movie. I didn't even know this person existed. Yeah.
I honestly, I glaze over when the ad comes. I don't even perceive what they're advertising to me anymore.
Yeah. I I don't. Although I have found a new channel that we won't raid to this time because this is a PG-13 stream. We will have a not PG-13 stream and we'll raid into. There's a Trailer Park Boys all the time Twitch, 24/7 Trailer Park
Is
Boys.
it's just playing the episodes?
It's just like random bits of random episodes and sketches and like it's amazing. I love it so much. I like watch trailer. I'm sorry. I was following. Yeah, Trailer Park Boys has my name on it
No,
right
I remember Trailer Park Boys.
now.
Yeah.
Love it. My husband's obsessed with it and he got me into it. So yeah.
I'm still thinking about the meats that he's smoking, to be honest. I haven't gotten that out of my head.
We'll send you a picture. He's making beans. So he you've never seen Trailer Park Boys, Sparky, so if you are easily offended, if you have delicate sensibilities and or if the particulars of white whiskey tango trash life might be, not up your alley, I would not. However, if that is your forte, would recommend. No, 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 no. Smoking meats. Smoking meats. No, no, no. What? Beets. Meats. He's making so science. He's taking his beef short ribs, and then he smokes them. Spends a whole day smoking them, and then he chops up the meat and he makes baked beans, and he smokes the baked beans and he smokes something else so it gets the smoked
Mhm.
flavor, and then he puts the short ribs in it and continues to smoke it. So it's like a 24-hour bean meat production.
I bet it's
It
incredible.
is incredible.
I mean, you had like, beans I don't particularly enjoy, but anything smoked meat I'm already on.
Smoked baked beans with smoked meats.
Bean texture induces for me like a fear response.
Oh, really?
Thanks to my father.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry.
for your husband, I would try it. I would try
Well, he also makes really good deer jerky, so maybe we can send you some deer
it. Ooh.
jerky. Maybe. We'll see if he has any left. Um, but yeah. So what I for those of you who don't know, uh, I'm no longer working at the district. Your British is a lot of loved baked beans here. Ooh. But when I was like thinking about soils and stuff, and you're saying that this is not like typical soil concentration. Like this is not what a typical soil is. So what does a typical soil look like instead of having like lots of sulfur and iron and copper and cobalt. Like what would you expect to find in a soil?
The big thing is just a lot of carbon.
Really?
Just yeah, so like because everything like is dying, decaying, living, and so nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, like these organic compounds that are regularly used by different animals, or when the animal is decaying, or if like fungi is processing them, like that's what I would expect to see if we're looking for bacteria that are supposed to be doing oxygenation living in this kind of situation.
Okay.
And so I
Okay.
guess I guess it from a volcanologist composition wise, after a volcano erupts, it makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Like of what that like I don't know, to me, naively, I am not a
No,
volcanologist,
that
right?
makes
But like
sense. I mean, I would expect to see high concentrations of heavy metals, trace elements, and things like that.
yeah, and so like this is I guess again why I was in the paper a little surprised that they were surprised
Yeah.
with the fact that there wasn't the cyanobacteria, right? Because it's like I never would have assumed that there would be carbon here because it's not really in a volcano's eruption to have that kind of organic matter that stuff would do really well on right away, you know?
Do you think they were really posing that question then? Or do you think this was more of a like, all right, we're pretty sure what the answer is going to be, but we're going to go through this and do the publication to get it published?
Ooh, yikes. Yeah.
Because those
I
happen.
think
I've done that.
oh, they for sure happen. Like so chat, like if you have a piece of data that is maybe not exciting because it's just like affirming what you might have already known, you're not really probably likely going to get that published, and so you have to frame things in a way
All about
that
how
is
you spin it.
yeah. And if you don't, and if you can't just publish a null result or negative results in most places, no one's going to take that, which is unfortunate, right? Because it's
That's how you
important
spend up.
information.
Yeah, people can be like, oh, I've spent years making this mistake and I'm going to tell other people. And that's not allowed, apparently. We have to make others' mistakes.
Yeah. So with that in mind, yeah, probably.
I think
I
so.
had it when reading it. I hadn't taken it that that route. I was just like, oh, I don't really understand why they're saying this, but yeah, that may very well be the issue here.
Yeah, I didn't find it. I mean, I guess I don't know the micro, you know, genomics and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it seemed really intuitive to me. I didn't. I guess I didn't realize how surprised they were, but also like I just kind of expected that result.
Yeah,
So yeah, maybe they did. Maybe they were like, well, this is what we thought, so let's spin it. And they were probably. I mean, it was published. So this was published after the really big caldera forming eruption. I I think that they probably did this and were able to publish it because they were riding on the popularity of that.
writing
The
oh
popularity of the eruption.
the title, the big tidal wave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to keep on theme.
Well, yeah, there's so. Oh my god! Like I trying to keep on top of the research and the papers coming out. Like for something like this that just happened in 2 years, that's like a one of a kind thing. There's so much. I even reviewed a paper, and I kept rejecting it outright because it's not a proper study. They it didn't. Yeah, it just should not have been submitted, and their finding, I'm using the word findings real loose here, fast and loose, were in another paper that had been published already, and so there's also just so much stuff coming out so fast, and part of my response in the review was like, okay, I understand that you can have a lot of overlap when you're having a high pressure research situation, but unfortunately this got published first, so I'm sorry.
I guess it's similar to with the when the COVID papers were coming out,
Yes,
that it was
exactly.
just like so much. And I don't know if there's an equivalent for this for geology, but for us in biology there's bioarchive where you can upload the paper, right, that's not yet peer reviewed, and it's
There
just like
is.
that.
We have
Yeah,
that.
so what is it called for geology?
uh ARXIV.
Okay, so that's where chem stuff goes too, right?
Yeah. We use ARXIV, and then there's a couple other ones, but usually that's just it. And then like I think Nature has its own preprint server, and yeah, Nature and Science do their own thing, but for the most part, it's ARXIV.
Okay, so yeah, that could be like there was a disclaimer on bioarchive where it was like don't have like if you see COVID stuff, like take it with a grain of salt because so many are coming out and they're not peer reviewed. So I wonder if it's like a similar vibe
Absolutely,
to what's happening.
absolutely, 100%, absolutely. That's why I was like rushing as soon as it happened. I was like, we gotta publish, we gotta be first. I mean, we were first, not like first on a science paper, but it's that rush.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's like it's one of those things too. It's like if you didn't have to rush and you had more time, could it have been a higher tier paper because you'd have the time
Absolutely.
to flesh out? But then if you don't, someone's gonna beat you to like the initial finding,
Hmm.
and then that novelty is worn off. So even then, if you go into the depths of it, it's not as big of a deal. It's
Yeah.
frustrating, Doc. Why are we like this?
I don't know. I don't know. I wish I could have a fulfilled life working in industry, but I just can't. I can't quit research, man. It's really cool. Hey, Ningao. Smikes wondered what the pH of lava is. I've left a couple questions. Smikes, I don't know about lava. I can tell you I have personally measured the pH of uh the acidic waters, like hydrosulfur waters, and like the yeah, the God, oh my God, I studied this and it's escaping me. Um, yeah, like the acidic waters and stuff that are in geysers and fumaroles. It's about a pH of 2 on a good day. Usually it's like 0 to 2. So pretty darn acidic. And hey, Ningao, can things still grow in this soil? Ooh, that's a really good question. Um, I think that this is really what we're talking about re-inhabiting, but all of these microbes would have to come before vegetation, right, Balint?
That's my take on it. Yeah, and then it would change the landscape to when there would be successful vegetation.
Yeah, and NME has
Like
a
right,
good point. Sorry.
yeah, like volcanic soil is supposed to be very good to grow in, but that's not like a right away kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it takes like 500 years or something for an inch of hard bedrock. I don't know about ash and soils, but an inch of hard bedrock to turn into an inch of into productive soil. Now ash weather's a lot easier, so probably much quicker. I think Mount St. Helens it was like 10 years or so maybe, before they started getting some of the there's like the plants that first show up. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like the first colonizing plants.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like very like early flavor plants.
yeah.
I
But
forget now the name, but it's like very basic and like not very complicated in its root systems or how it doesn't need pollinators and these other things like
usually
wind
they're found like
distribution.
high up in the
Yeah,
alpine. Yeah,
like good at low concentrations of minerals and other things, so that the survivability is more likely. Like, and it's not inhospitable for it.
yeah. So I think it takes several years for those to form, or for those to come in. Where I've seen them at Mount St. Helens, though, they're in like ash deposits. They're not in the crater. There's nothing in the crater. Weeds
And then
started
maybe
growing
that's
on.
just like it's too like sulfury or like it's not. It hasn't been allowed to become like that hospitable environment.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So the closer you get near the cone, you're gonna have continued emissions and stuff, and you're not gonna have an environment. But yeah, slug bikers from Seattle or from like this area too, and she said the weeds started to grow on piles of ash next to I-5 in less than 10 years, but they were probably mixed with other stuff. Yeah, I think the further you get away from there, you just have like that one-time deposit, and those are that's like the fertile farm soils and stuff would be the stuff like farther away, that gets deposited and can replenish the soil.
and I guess that's also like the graph that we were looking at that map earlier with like the dots and like where they were taking from. Like that's again why, what the expectation would be from those
Mm-hmm.
dots and what we might find.
Yeah, I would have expected, yeah, something similar to what you were saying. So more like less volcanic component in the outer reaches and more towards the cone. You can even see like look at the water. It's just not. That's not like.
I'd be curious as to what's in the water too. Like they didn't do any aquatic sampling, but it's I don't know, just from like what all can they pull out from that particular site and compare it to immediately around the cone versus a little bit further and further out. It's like maybe that might give you an idea of colonizers as well. I don't know.
There was. This just came out. This literally just came out.
Oh,
March
cool.
12th, 2024. This is that unique short lived water lake. So when Kilauea Summit collapsed in 2018, there it filled up with like rainwater and stuff, and you had this super acidic lava lake that then boiled off from the heat of the magma as it came back in 2020. Um, so I haven't read this either, so I don't know. And this is like the first time something like this was ever observed. Initial sample had salinity of 71,000 milligrams per liter. I don't know how to like put that into water chemistry terms. Um, not. It doesn't look like it would be fun to live in, for me.
No, but like, but for a flavor of microorganism,
Mm-hmm.
it might be a field day to live
At pH of 4. Oh, this is cool. Rather than significant scrubbing of magmatic volatiles, leaching of basalt and reactions with sulfate minerals resulted in high concentrations of sulfate and other solutes. So it's not like degassing of a magma body at depth. This was the rainwater interacting with the minerals in the crater to actually leach out sulfur and concentrate it in the water. All the salts, think of the electrolytes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's. I was like, oh, I can answer your question right now. That's what it is, because that
in.
just
That's
came
cool.
out like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and just having that comparison, like, right, what's different in that population as a function of what you have in there versus the surrounding areas. And that might give you a sense of, like, I mean, it might be the same, or it might be like, it'd be cool to see, I guess, on a map, those populations, including that water as well, seeing how
Yes.
different or similar it is.
So I'm hoping this is the part of the paper I don't understand and that I know you're an expert in. This is a circle plot. It's got lots of lines and colors.
Yes.
What is going on here? Please explain all of this to me because I can understand the rocks. I don't understand what any of this is.
Yeah, so this panel B is a little bit of a disaster in that it's very hard to read. Like, I mean, even if I zoom in, like the
Mm-hmm.
crazy levels, it's still really difficult to make out. Um, you're looking at a phylogenetic tree, so it is a family tree of life and connectivity, and it's done on a circle because it's just such a large range of organismal relatedness that you have. So your start point is
The gray.
pinpointed in the center,
Uh huh.
and then it goes out at about what, a negative 45-degree angle,
This right here.
and then spreads a little, so you can start seeing where the common ancestors are. So there's that like big line in the pink
Uh
that
huh.
goes up, and then there's a big bifurcating point.
Yeah, so you got stuff to the left, and then okay,
So like,
okay.
right, that it's a little hard to see because it doesn't go by any order. Like, I don't know, our eyes naturally want to go from like left to right,
Uh
but
huh.
here it's like it's springing in the center of the pink, and that's where there's a bifurcation point. So like a common ancestor between the light blue. Actually, I don't think.
Oh,
I think that split point, actually, the common ancestor isn't even linked to the pink at that stage, right? If you follow the line,
it
it goes
goes down here and then
to like the darker blue, right?
up,
Yep.
and then it like over here and up, or no, over
And then, yep.
here and up in the
And then
pink
splits.
goes
Yeah.
back. That's crazy. So it's just like a cladogram, but it's smushed and rounded. Is
Yeah, and the reason, so like doing the rounded is just if you imagine that you had like the vertical ones where it's like static and it just all the lines coming.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much like weird, like you see how the lines are just like such distant from one another, and there's this like weird overlap in between the different regions. It would
Yeah.
just be a mess, like
Oh
more of a
wow.
mess than this is. So it's just like a different flavor of visual representation.
Okay.
the di- the different colors represent the different like bacterial communities that they're looking at. So it's like which phylum of bacteria are you looking at? And actually, there's not a color key, which is frustrating.
I think it's up here.
Oh, is it the same as an A? That would
Mm-hmm.
make sense. Yeah, so it's the same as an A. I still, my eyes would love it to have it be in like next to this, or like make that key
Well,
overlap with A and B because that's
yeah,
just
I don't
how
know
my
how
brain
this
works.
got past review in this condition with this figure.
Yeah, I don't also know if it's colorblind. Finally, to be
It's
honest,
not.
because it's like it's not perfect. It's just
It's
not.
just blah.
And then the bars on the edge of the circle represent the population. So the higher the bar, the more represented they were in the samples that were identified. But the catch here is it's not breaking down sample by location of where it was collected, but this is that global image of the population at the island.
Yeah, why are they not breaking? I mean, I bet it's in supplemental data somewhere. I would be surprised if they didn't analyze that. That's something I would want to see, right?
Oh god, I honestly I can't remember the supplement
Oh, I
because I
didn't even
read
look at the supplement. I didn't even, I'm saying I'm not going to look at the supplement. That's a lot
I
of work.
I would think that it would be cooler to do like a trace across those locations
Like
and
cross
just
sectional.
seeing, yeah, exactly, and seeing how the populations are shifting with the
Mhm.
look, because like of just what we've been hypothesizing today, right?
That's
You might
not covered
predict
in
that there,
here,
yeah.
right? I don't think it's covered in here. They don't. No, talk about abundances of genes, but they don't have any sort of like spatial distribution of species or anything like that.
No, it's looking at that global level, which again, like if it should be in supplement.
It'd be so much better of a paper if they would have put this in the supplement and actually like looked at the spatial distribution variations.
I wonder. I don't know the journal, but if you're limited on figure number,
Yeah, that's true. That's
it.
true.
But I mean,
Um,
even if you're limited on figure number, just have like 30 panels to it or something, right? Like, yeah. I mean, it's like a neat figure, but
yeah, no,
it's super hard, I think, to read, especially with that like that pink line. Honestly, is what threw me at the beginning of like
this right
why
here.
is yeah, like why is it radiating there? And it's just like the relatedness, but it just isn't how, I don't know, I would plot a standard like phylogenetic tree. Like the oldest one is always at the bottom, and there's like some like immediate way of reading it, and this is a little bit more involved.
Yeah, so we've got some chats. Yeah, so Ningao, the vertical line in the center, this is where the tree of life, I think, starts for this. And then these are different species, families.
It's
What?
like so each color is a different phylum, and then like each terminal point would be a different
Mm.
genus species.
So this is like the most basic, like, common ancestor.
That pink spot to like everything in the
Yeah,
tree, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And what's also then hard is the light blue is actually older, or actually no, there's the next to the light blue there's what is it, that like mustardy
This
green.
this thing, yeah.
Yeah, like that actually like terminates fast, like earlier, so that's like the oldest thing in the tree.
Huh. That's cool. Well, what's the gray for then?
I have no idea what the oh, other, so it's probably things that were just like not yet mapping against like a sequence database, and so it's
Uh,
because they didn't do sequencing,
oh,
right? They did shotgun sequencing,
what is that?
so they took like random segments of the genome and sequenced it instead of the entirety of the genome of everything in there. And so you're gonna be getting segments that don't necessarily map against an existing like reference genome. And so if they don't map, I think they were just my understanding is they were dumped into the other category. And that could either be a function of like, you can imagine that there's a mutant line
Mm-hmm.
that has a new inserted genetic element, and that's what you happen to sequence, and so that's why it's not mapping, or the genus species has never been mapped before because you've never done the full genome sequence, and then they're just dumping it into other.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, they're
Think
only sequencing segments of it, and what makes it harder for me as well, of like for the molecular side of things, is that they're not sequencing the same region of the genomes across all these. It's just like we're just collecting this pool of DNA, we're chopping it up and just like sequencing random stuff in here and seeing what it maps against.
that's
Versus like a standard gene or a gene body in all of these different organisms.
so sometimes in geology we do that. We just sample. You sample whatever rocks you get. You don't know what part of the volcano they came from. You don't know exactly where in the magma chamber they were. You just know that it came out of the volcano, and something happened to it. But I think like when you're talking about sampling genes, like they already have the thing. Would it not have been equally as easy to standardize it?
I guess I don't know how they're extracting these samples. Like, how dirty is it? How intact everything is to begin with. In naive mind, you should have a bunch of cells.
Mm.
That does make it so that if you're not isolating the different species, there's going to be different populations and therefore different amounts and therefore different representations. And so
Mm.
if you do a sequencing experiment, you will be getting differences in like levels of genes and gene products just because of like what you've already put in is
Oh,
what you're going to be the output. So it's that like garbage in, garbage out setup.
okay.
So I think what they're trying to do is in a way
Make the
attempting to standardize the number.
mm.
I just don't think it's good.
Trying to make the best out of garbage, maybe.
Yeah, but I just don't think it's good, like any better. Um, the way I would have done it is that you can at least isolate different groups of bacteria. So if not getting down to the genus species, if you take that sample that has a ton of different things in it and aliquot them out into different almost pools
Mm-hmm.
of like certain nutrient composition that certain populations will do better or worse on, you can then kind of select for like, okay, here's my cyanobacteria, here's my archobacteria, here are these other things, and let me just sequence what's in here. Sure, some things might not make it because you haven't perfected the right like living composition, but at least they'll be able to pull in more.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm gonna try to open something up. Oh, that makes sense. So
Is how
you
I would have done it, but
so does that mean we're gonna write a grant and we're gonna go to Tonga and we're gonna figure out what is actually on these islands now?
let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, chat. We're only gonna need $1 billion.
It's the tree experiments for like the equipment and the staff time and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Only $1 billion. We can do it, chat. Come on. We can do it. I'm trying to find this. Here, I'm gonna go to. Oh shoot! I'm looking through my stuff. I'm trying to find this video that I thought I had still, because it's amazing. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Ah ha ha. Okay, so is this it, or is this it? Oh, this was it. Okay. Open. I'm gonna download this actually. Dismiss. Great. Sorry, I'm just like, I don't like showing some of my files all the time.
Yeah, yeah, no, of course. Feel free to to hide the
Yeah.
scene.
Oh no, this is good. All right. So this is the tsunami model, because I know a lot of people like this is just insane. The guy, I have to tell you about how he like constrained the energy of the explosions. So you're good for 1250. Dr. Evil would support this venture. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure Dr. Evil would support this venture, enemy. Um
We eat some
so
sharks.
yeah. This guy constrained. Have you ever heard of Operation Bongo?
I don't know. Tell me.
Operation Bongo was a thing in the 1960s where the United States military wanted to test how supersonic missiles would affect people if they were to fly over cities. So they just decided to fly a bunch of supersonic jets over Oklahoma City for a time period. Thank you so much for the follow, Ashik. So they flew a bunch of supersonic operation. I'm going to pull it up on Wikipedia. Yeah, Oklahoma City Sonic Boom Tests, also known as Operation Bongo 2. So they flew a bunch of supersonic jets in the 60s that began at 7 a.m. and ended in the afternoon. 8 flights, 8 sonic booms per day. And then they measured the windows that were broken and the distribution of windows breaking and how many people were injured by the windows breaking and how much property damage there was. And they correlated the amount of window breakage with the explosions of the sonic booms. And so we have a direct chart of this is the energy of this explosion, assuming that this many windows are broken, right? What do they have against Oklahoma City? As somebody from the Midwest, my mouth is closed. I have no opinion. Sounds like the Chicago Air and Water Show. Oh my God. Yeah, terrible idea. So the bunch of pressure from the Oklahoma City residents, obviously, raised heck and blah, blah, blah. But they're, the point of the story is we actually have equations from experiments that were flown, like produced sonic booms that show like, okay, with this explosion you get this many percentage of windows breaking. Well, when Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai erupted, this island here, this is Nuku'alofa, and this is where most of the residents of the country live, on this main island. And a lot of windows were broken from the sonic booms of the volcanic explosions. So this is a science paper, and I just thought it was brilliant. I thought that was the most brilliant, creative thing ever. That he constrained the explosive energy of this eruption from the numbers of windows broken at 64 kilometers distance, and back calculated to what the explosive energy would have been based on the equations from Operation Bongo.
That's really cool. So even though it was an insane experiment,
It's useful. Yeah, Slug, that is one of the things they did use to gauge the force of the meteor. Yes. Mm-hmm. Isn't that cool?
that's cool that it's at least usable data.
Yeah.
Part of it is like, oh man, that could have been really terrible.
Like, that's really insane, but also like I tell that story because I just like, this is the most amazing creative application of that data. But like, yeah, you can see this is definitely some big tsunami energy.
Wow.
Jim, I bet it was probably just like regular single pane because that's what they had in the 60s. But you can see here, like, they're really concerned about looking at the interplay in the shallow tidal zone of how the like tsunami waves keep on propagating. And then also how having like a coral reef in front. So like, look at when there's a coral reef in front versus not a coral, like nothing breaking, how the tsunami wave impacts the island. So like, watch the two things on the right and you can see what the waves do. And like, come on. So it kind of like breaks it if you have something in front of it, because a tsunami moves like the entire ocean at once.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see like it coming around the backside. It breaks right here. Yeah, that's cool.
It's a really cool video, and I really like how there's like the different elements to it too, like on the graphs.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah, I think that's a really really cool visual. I was just mesmerized. I was mesmerized by the map part, and then I didn't even notice the first time that it was like the sidebars were also going, and then I was like, oh, look at that, that's so cool.
It's a lot. It's a lot of really cool data. It shows like if you have like seawalls, coral reefs, or barrier islands, pretty much anything in front of your main landmass, it helps to
Yeah.
dampen the effect of the tsunami. So like things like that are really good when you have that sort of situation. I'm guessing the federal government did not replace the windows. I don't think so, Smikes. I think that's why there was public pressure.
Can you imagine how much that was? We just got this replaced, and
I couldn't even imagine, like, that would so not fly now. That would so not fly. Like, I don't even know how they got away with that, but yeah. Yeah, windows now are not cheap. Mm-mm. Not cheap at all. Well, I think that's covering that paper. Belint, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, if
yes,
you don't
man.
mind. If we had somebody in chat who didn't know you and had never seen your stream before, why should they go follow you besides just, obviously enriching their life and, because you're an amazing, amazing streamer. You've never seen his stream before. Oh, Smikes, you are missing out. I have to wait 11 minutes and 28 seconds? What? I'll do this. Shout out Science Streams. There we go. And I did it wrong. So go follow him. He's here in chat. I obviously am big brain that cannot do computer things. So I don't know how big that brain is. But what sorts of things are on your stream, Blint?
So we try to do a variety of biological science content. So we don't do this amazing geology that you see here, or the volcanology component of it. But Lita and I run the stream. So Lita's my wife, and we have our PhDs in molecular biology, and so we try to do everything in a biological context. And so we specialized on insects. Lita did her undergrad work in bees, grad school, and master's in Drosophila fruit fly genetics. And then in her postdoc, she did planarians and stem cells. And for me, my undergrad, it was parasitic wasps and fruit flies. Fruit fly neuroscience, genetics, and behavior in grad school, and postdoc was ant genetics, behavior, and epigenetics. And so it's a lot of terms right there, but essentially we specialize on those insects, but a lot of the biological principles and experiments we did can be utilized across all forms of biological life, like gene engineering, RNA interference, behavioral experiments, and we dissect the science in a hopefully an accessible way. So we do microscopy on Mondays, which we had Volcano Doc on, looking at things under a microscope. And I think one of the fan favorites is looking at the amber specimens that we have and trying to identify with the crew what exactly is preserved in the resin.
That's always cool.
30 million years old. It's kind of like at the point where you almost lose the track and trace that it's 30 million years old, that we're just like have it in our hand and that we're looking at it under the microscope.
Yeah, I forget that all the time. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a 2 billion year old rock, and somebody's like, what? And I'm like, yeah.
Wait, you don't have one of these? Right? But it is. It's one of those you like. Sometimes you can lose the beauty of that.
We do.
But we try not to. But looking at it under a microscope, do model builds and talk about the science that inspired the model. So currently, a kingfisher bird is what we're building.
Ooh.
Out of Lego, and you might be like, Belint, what the heck do you know about that? Well, it turns out that the tau protein, which is primarily implicated in Alzheimer's, is turned on differently in fisher birds and helps prevent them from getting concussions.
Wow.
So, talking about the science of that. Wednesdays and Sundays, we do our own artwork. So as a way to make science accessible in a visually fun way. Thursdays are our video game nights. We've been playing Grounded, where you get shrunken down to the size of an insect, like a la Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Um, and like it's like the insect stuff is really well done in the game. So we dissect how what the behaviors are, and then science news of the week on Fridays, and then as Doc says on Saturdays, Lita's science night where she dissects the science of science fiction and anything else that she's kind of vibing on. So we're trying to have different things every day, and bringing more people into the sciences. That's our big mission.
Yeah, I think you explained everything really well. I've learned so much from your stream, like genuinely speaking. I
Hard to
always
kind, Doc.
no, you and Lita and Alona are fantastic science communicators, and you have some of the best mods and best community. Like you truly are an amazing science communicator and somebody to definitely look up to. I
I
really do think
appreciate
so.
that. Hey, right back at you. Yeah, then the Munchkin is very good at the fossil hunting streams.
Munchkin is good at the fossil hunting. She's going to be a paleontologist, I think. She might.
You never know. I just want her to be good at whatever she picks.
I think that's all we want for our kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm supportive of whatever my daughter does.
Our generation of parenting, like us as parents.
Yeah, we're way more supportive and not trying to force children into what we think their career routes should be, which is a good transition because how did you get interested into being a biologist, Belinda? What made you want to be an ant geneticist?
So biology, I really liked as a kid nature documentaries and nature TV shows. I don't know if you remember this one, Doc, but it was on Disney Channel. It's like the Jeff Corwin show and Amazing Animals with this animated lizard who would show you animals and teach you about the science behind them. And this was after I had moved to the U.S. And in Hungary, I loved going to the zoo and learning about animals there. Dad was a scientist, so he had his own lab. I learned very quickly I don't want to work with mammals because the way you extract sufficient enough blood samples from mice is very not for my sensibility, but I still thought the lab was cool. And then, honestly, as a kid in like middle and high school, I did not enjoy science because I had some really like bad teachers that didn't make it exciting. And then there was when I went to undergrad, I actually was told that I was going to go to med school. Right. Speaking of like picking careers, and my parents were like, well, to get to med school, you need to work in a lab. So go get that like med school lab check mark. And when I went there, I fell in love with the lab and like the puzzles and the science within the lab and like doing the experiments and actually figuring out new things. And so that kind of got me hooked. And I applied to med school. I got in as well, but then I ended up going to grad school for better or worse, right? And then the ant genetics thing, I'd always found documentaries of like leafcutter ants and insects really interesting of like how does something like this work. And so when my PhD was a lot on like social learning and social interaction genetics of fruit flies, they gave me the opportunity to study that in a more social insect like an ant, and I was like, oh, let's jump at that. Like that's really cool.
That is
and so
cool.
It's like that's kind of where that ended up where we are now.
Oh, okay. Cool. I always like to ask because I think it's really important to just like show that you were told you were going to be a medical doctor and you have gone to grad school and succeeded greatly as something else.
And now it's a totally different thing, and so I think it's hard, especially being raised in that like background of where you're supposed to figure out what you're supposed to do when you're 10 years old. But you can change a career, and you can and I'm learning this every day and struggling it with still, but viewing as like this event was just a stepping stone to this event. So like grad school and postdoc, I don't think without those experiences would I be a valid science communicator, because I wouldn't have the expertise to be able to talk about what we talk about on these streams. And that's like the big goal now, is to make this a full-time gig and like really bring the science to folks who might otherwise not be able to have it. And I think that's a mission that like you're doing too, Doc, is like how many people actually get access to someone who works with volcanoes.
Yeah.
I've I tell if I was a kid and I had access to your stream, I'd be asking you so many questions. And I think that would instill a big love of science into people because there's so many communities that it's not that there's not a kid there who can't be a scientist. It's they just don't have access to the resources.
Right.
And so like that's also why it's so important what you're doing on stream. And obviously not just for
Likewise,
kids,
all of
adults
us.
too.
Yeah, I think
Right.
at the beginning of stream, Daniel, we have a community member, Daniel Sargent, who's just a wonderful person. I like him a lot. We both have a big thing for trains, and he, he likes to learn, but college is too expensive. And I think that that's a big thing right now is that college is so expensive that we can barely make ends meet to feed ourselves or to house ourselves. How are we supposed to pay money to learn stuff too? We don't even have time. And so I think like by providing this as essentially free, like, yeah, you have to watch ads, but yeah, whatever. That's a bathroom break, in my opinion. Hey, Nerdwino! But like, I think that it's so important to have, a space where somebody can come in, not have to pay money, learn if they want to, and like if they have somewhere to be, give us a lurk, jet out, whatever. You can come back and watch the VOD later. It's very informal. It's on your own time, and it's on your own interests and what you find interesting learning. And I think that's what makes Twitch such a wonderful space for this.
Yeah, and the live really responsive Q&As, right? Like if you can put on a YouTube video, but I'll be honest with you, I have more questions than the answers from usual YouTube videos. And so being able to ask the expert, and that's the factor too that people have to be careful on, is because it is a public platform. There is the possibility that someone comes on here and just is spouting nonsense,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why I think like you are the doctor
Well,
of volcanoes on this platform.
no
And so
thanks.
you are the expert that people should go to. And volcanoes are cool.
Well, thank
And like
you.
so like, it's chat, like having a degree doesn't mean that you are a good scientist or a good communicator. None of that.
Or that you
It just
even know how a rice cooker works. Like, that doesn't mean anything.
but it does mean in theory you have had the training to have some level of experience. That's all it means. And then it's like you can be of authority figures. Like I don't know, Doc, about like your journey, but would you say that from when you started streaming to now, the way that you explain things has evolved?
Absolutely. 100%. Um, and even just like seeing how other science communicators communicate as well and things that they like need to break down ways that you treat other people as well. I find really just refreshing and just a good technique to model myself after, truly.
Well, and then that's I guess it's like we're you and I and everyone on here we're constantly learning about
Mm-hmm.
how to best explain the science too. Like just because I know how CRISPR-Cas9 genetic engineering works doesn't mean that I could explain it right away. And like I started in a button-down shirt with a PowerPoint set. The first science deep dive, right? Like how cringe is that? Why would that? Okay, button down because I thought
You're a
that,
scientist.
and you have to look a certain way, right? And like there's like that amount of like trust that you might get, and that's not true. And I know, like I knew at the time, like I don't care how someone looks to trust them, but like that's something that's a threshold, and
It's built
how
into you.
yeah, and it's like, do you have to make it super serious? And it's like that's actually not what's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you talk to people and then how you do the explanations. And like you said, you've made a great community where I can pop on alert, which I always pop on. I see you go live. We're live, and I'm like,
Yeah.
pop on alert for you.
Likewise.
And it's like, you can come back and float in and out, and it might be that you're there for the community, but you will just passively pull in information and learn. And like we've had folks who message me, they'll be like, I'm a food service person. I have no idea, like 10 months ago, what an ommatidia was and the antennal segment numbers of insects, and now I can identify bugs outside.
That's so cool.
And, right? That's amazing that, like,
Yeah.
something like that can happen. And it's really like live feedback from folks, being able to be like, oh, I don't really understand this. Like, okay, let me explain it a different way. And making science accessible, I think that's like a huge mission statement for us both. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why, chat, like if you see like, one of the science streamers, like we have Nerdowino here too, right? PhD in NASA science and engineering, like having those folks on and giving them the credibility of being there and viewing them is kind of pushing Twitch in the direction of, this is a platform for education. People can't go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, like, you can take an MIT course that you can watch the videos on. I think that, it's open access.
But that
But
doesn't
you
mean you
won't,
can ask questions.
yeah, and if it's not at an accessible level, are you ever going to really learn it?
Yeah.
I don't know, like, because how much time do we have, like, as people with full-time jobs to go out and learn, like, for a course that is free? Like, it's hard, and so it's like it's that live feedback is huge,
Mm-hmm.
and that's, again, like, we are trying to provide what I think is an important service.
I agree. Speaking of interactivity, college is the worst now. You're supposed to declare your major right away. Yeah, no, Smikes, I totally agree. Not not a big fan of that. And grads, wow, there's so much chat. Learning the basics of how to research something, ask questions, figure out how to answer them, communicate your journey process. Oh my goodness. That is a lot. I guess I never thought of it being put that way. I just there's another geologist in my community, Deep Earthbound, and they said it a really good way. Like, I just want to do cool science with my friends. I'm just like, that's all it comes down to. I'm just trying to do cool science with my friends and share it with people. I'm not no other no other agenda. I just like doing cool science with friends and telling people about it. Rice.
It's a shame how little some scientists will think that way.
Yeah.
Like, it is, like, that's again why you are a gem on this platform. Is that, number one, you're on this platform to teach people, but also, like, so many people, at least in the biological side of things, right, don't view science communication as a worthwhile thing, and almost come in it with the mentality of, well, people aren't going to understand it anyway, so why should I waste my time?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just going to further cause, like you said, Doc, there's no funding from the NSF or NIH for volcanology and geology. It's because people are like, well, that's not important, because why would I care? Because, like, no one's in the front line
Mm-hmm.
bringing this info to folks. And, like, when you were on the stream and you showed us, like, the island detecting and, like, what that means and, like, why we need the money for, like, it's very clear, and you're also really excited about it,
How
right? You're
many
not just like,
volcanoes are not well monitored that are within a lot of people?
yeah. And it's not that you can't monitor them and we don't have the tech for it.
We do. We just don't got the money. And
Yeah.
there's some issues. We talked about, like, and a lot of mountains are sacred to indigenous populations, and so you do have that sort of you have those sensitivities you do have to deal with.
Sure, but
But
I
for the
wonder,
most
if you
part,
had the investment, if you could have other predictive models that maybe you don't have to, like, from other mountains where you can get the information, you can make newer, better things that you can go to the indigenous tribe and be like, hey, y'all, this is an even further distance that we need now, and it's just one piece of equipment because of all the advances we've made, and this will help keep you safe. Like, there could be those
those
talks versus having
conversations.
to put up, like, cover the mountain with equipment.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of USGS people do have those conversations do happen. There's a lot of people in the volcano disaster assistance program and hazards protection groups that go out and do have those talks with stakeholders and community members and leaders and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. I just mean, like, it might be easier
yeah.
if you had less to put in. Like, if we've developed tech further along, that it's now easier to do the monitoring. And
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Thank you so much for the follow, Real Dan Schneider. Aren't societal forms nummy? Neither of us talk down to people, and we admit when you don't know. Yes, we do. That's really important. It is. It is super important. It is super
yeah, there
important.
is. I mean, there's in a lot of scientists that I see get, like, the news media interviews. It's almost like this sense of arrogance of, like, well, I'm an expert, not just in my field, but just, like, in everything. So I'm going to speak with it in authority. And it's like, you can't call them out necessarily because they, have a lot of money and funding. And it's like, it's again that power dynamic. So I think being here and humanizing scientists too, like your cat's coming on screen, Doc, before the like during the warm up of the stream when you were with the lovely cone. You're giving them the pat, right? Like that humanizes you. You're not just this white coat wearing, no friends, no love of life kind of person, right? You're like you're actually on the foot, like the ground as a regular person, but then also you have this all this experience and all
Mm-hmm.
this amazing knowledge that you're sharing with folks, and that's huge.
Thanks. Likewise for you and Lita and Nerduino and many of the science streamers on here. For real. Funding is super interesting. What fraction of the budget do you people think should be spent on science? That dude, Nerduino, just make that the focus of your next stream. We'll come in and talk about it. For real. That's like a whole that's a whole panel discussion. That's like an interactive that way over my head. Way I don't we don't have time for that. We don't have time for that. So, Belen, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go. I know that it's not quite as early for you as it is for me, but I went to bed when you were still live last night. So, I've probably had more sleep than you.
Yeah, we kind of go a little wild in there.
How late do you guys stay up? I don't know how you do it.
What? Last night I think we rounded out around 3 a.m. And the night before was like 4. I know it was a relatively early night.
Oh, I am boring. I'm boring compared to you, sir. My butt is in bed by 10, period.
Yeah, your butt's in bed, but I'm not out, dancing.
That's
I'm just,
true.
it's one of those things. It's like, it's fun. It gives me joy and life force to be able to do this, and I'm in a blessed position where we have an audience. Because you remember when we started, like we as in.
Yeah, it was really hard getting started streaming for sure. It's really hard when you're starting.
You're dissecting a paper. If there's 2 people there, who are you talking to? Like, right? Like, honestly, and it's really, really hard to jump into it because you're not playing a game, so there's not necessarily that category that someone's looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And science and tech isn't a known category, and so like, it's like, Bullet, why'd you go 6 hours? Like, well, we're having fun and people are asking questions and there's getting people excited, and it's like. Then there's the other side too. I'm like, I want to make it a full-time gig, and so then I don't even notice the time.
Yeah.
And then I notice the time the next day. But no, it's really fun, and I'm really grateful to be in a position where I can actually be doing this.
We're really grateful to have you, even though you don't listen to your mods apparently, allegedly. So
Allegedly.
What time does Lita start stream tonight?
She would usually be starting at 10:15 Eastern.
Mm-hmm.
She's had a little bit of a stomach ache, so if the stomach ache doesn't get better, then we might push it to a Discord movie night tonight and see, just based on how she's feeling. But if she's okay, she'll be around 10:15 p.m. Eastern tonight.
Okay. Either way, we'll both be on tomorrow. You'll be on at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, right?
Yes, ma'am.
4:30 p.m. Eastern?
Yes. It's also the last day of the month, so it's the last day for subs to count for Partner Plus in March, and anyone who self-sub gets entered. I have to do the plug. Where is the Kevin? There he is.
Yes. Shameless plugs, please. Shameless plugs.
This crocheted Kevin that Lita made. So we're doing monthly raffles for handmade SciComm character plushies. This is one of our characters, and Lita crocheted him. And the reason we're doing it is we're going for a 70-30 split. If we get this 300 points 3 months in a row, then we're able to, get a 70-30 split for a year. And every month after that we get another 300 points, the year extends. And so,
wow.
If that comes through an ambassador, then I can definitely make this full time. Because like honestly, it's like the health insurance cost is like the limiting factor for the family. But if we pull these things off, like I would love nothing more than to make this the true full time gig.
Well, maybe depending if I'm not successful in securing a academic position like a actual gig at a uni this cycle, which hopefully I will. But if I'm not, then I might try to go full time and maybe even think about trying to get a grant.
I selfishly, I would say that it would be great if you could, because I think you're a big voice for good.
Oh no, the grant would be with all of us.
Oh no. I meant you just streaming,
Oh, okay.
the streaming part. But yes, yes, no, please get the money too.
Like, I would like to
Um,
have some money.
no, 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 please take all the money. But like, just from the perspective of like how important, like there is not another volcanologist. Like there, like how small the scientific sphere is on the platform. Whenever we do have an expert on, like you, it's like let's keep them and make sure they continue growing because it's that opportunity right there
Mm-hmm.
to change the mindset of so many people and even like revolutionize the platform for education. Like, there's like you could be the founder of like this entire sector of like that part of the sciences on Twitch. If we can get you to full time and keep you going and sustained, and we're trying to push the biology, or like Nerduino's pushing the
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 bits.
the astronomy, the NASA sciences, and the engineering, and then Danny's obviously pushing paleontology. Like, if people could have a smorgasbord to pick from the experts, and like go on what to pick, I think that would be remarkable. So again, I want you to be successful in whatever you want, Doc. But like,
Oh.
I just selfishly want you to be very successful on the streaming front of things.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for the bits. And thank you again for the bits, Nerdwino. I will
We're
let
just
you.
trying to kick off a train.
Well, you can kick off a train. I have to take a break, though. I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to take a quick restroom break before we come back and do some science stuff. Nerdwino, thank you. Thank you so much for gifting that sub. I really, really appreciate it. And NME, enjoy the emotes, and you are entered into the Lava Lab giveaway. So I will be streaming tomorrow. We will be taking a break April 7th. No stream April 7th. I'm out of town for a big interview. Jim, thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you guys. And then we'll be back on April 14th, and we'll be drawing for the Lava Lab giveaway. We've got a big hunk of rose quartz. It's about that big. About like you can hold it in your fist to give away. And science is also entered in there. You can, if you don't sub, you can turn in channel points. That way everybody can participate. You're not required to pay money at all to participate. Just hang out and cash in your channel points just like Science did. Except for I'm pretty sure he's subbed, so I'm going to give him his channel points back later.
Thank you so much for having me on, Volcano Doc. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. I will talk to you later.
Have a good one, everybody. Bye.
Farewell, sir.